Hey everybody, it's Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com. So today I'm going to show how to diagnose one particular problem I've been seeing more and more on Vespa GTSs, specifically ones that are over 10 years old at this point. And I'll kind of go through my process and my steps on how you'd find a problem with this. So this scooter's got a symptom where the check engine light comes on after you ride it for a little bit. It seems to ride fine. You know, sometimes the scooter may stall occasionally when you have an issue like this. And fortunately with a dealership, I could plug it into a computer and I could tell you exactly what the code I see. It shows an O2 sensor, open circuit, or lean. And I'm watching a fuel monitor, which is an adjustment that the computer makes. It can add or subtract 25% of the baseline fuel. You know, it's a lot. You got to understand how fuel injection all works to understand what's going on. But basically the computer in the fuel injection system is trying to compensate at idle. It's trying to add 25% more fuel than what it normally would need for a perfectly good running engine, the idle. And typically that indicates you know, 3 different things is what my experience is when you see that issue. The most likely one is you got a leaky intake manifold. I'm talking an air leak, so it's pulling air, or you know, there's a vacuum behind the intake manifold in your throttle body and the injector that's on top of the intake manifold, so you have an air leak there. And I'll show you how to check for that. The second one I'll show you, I'm going to keep it a secret because I'll show you where the other air leak could be. And the third one, if you know there's no air leaks, actually 2 other ones, it could be, you know, 3 or 4. It could be possibly a clogged injector, very unlikely though. Injectors are very, very reliable. Mechanically, the connectors are, if you break the connector on it, which is a common problem with these early GTS 250s, that obviously it just doesn't run at all, but it's not too likely I've ever seen clogged injectors. And this scooter sat for a long time. The nice thing is fuel injection systems are under high pressure, unlike carburetors where it relies on Venturi effects and just the manifold vacuum to pull the fuel through some real small holes. These have the benefit of having high pressure behind them, so if there's any clog, it blows it right through. Unless you have a lot of debris in the tank, it's not likely you're going to have a clogged injector, so I don't see that much. And the last one, it truly could be a faulty O2 sensor that no longer reads correctly. So we're going to start this scooter. It's run for a while. Even worked a little bit to start. And sometimes you'll have a scooter where it's idling higher than it should be. There's some stuff you can see in the computer. I'm not going to show the computer in this, but you know, let it warm up a little bit. And a simple way to check for air leaks is to artificially richen up areas. And you could do it carefully with something like car spray. You could also do it with propane gas. That's a little more dangerous. Probably want to have a fire extinguisher at hand, which I have all over the place here in the shop. And it's been a while since we've had to use one, but they've been used before in a service shop. You're likely at some point to have a gasoline fire. So the scooter's idling. I could tell it's just not quite the perfect GTS idle. One other thing, always make sure your valves are within specification. This scooter's really low miles, so I don't suspect any issues with the valves, but the age could indicate a dried intake manifold. So let me show you how you check for a leaky intake manifold. So underneath the seat, you pull the bucket up. You got a couple basic things. You got the ECU / throttle body, which also controls the idle and everything electronic on the scooter. You got the injector, and it's still secured in the clip, so we know we don't have a broken injector. If you wiggle the injector and it stalls out, then you just got a broken injector. So you just give it some sprays around the thing, and oftentimes you'll hear the idle go, it will raise. It's not changing at all. And I'm only doing little bursts around this intake manifold. It's likely the leak, either there's a split in the rubber, because this thing is rubber mounted, or it could be leaking where it makes a seal up against the aluminum cylinder head. And sometimes I even see them leak at the injector or the hose clamp, or the throttle body's not seated all the way. So no problems here. We know there's no problems here. I'm going to raise the scooter. I'm going to show you the second most likely area that will have an air leak on these scooters. So on the left side, there's a skirt that goes along this left side right here, and it's all removed so you can see what's going on up here. And I don't know if the camera can get the light. I already see the problem here. So see that hose is broken right away, and that's your evaporative emissions carbon canister. I don't recommend removing them. They're very reliable other than this hose, especially on older ones. And pretty much if I spray a little, it will change the idle a little bit. So we got an air leak right there. And that's a pretty easy one just to visually check. So you can see the hose is broken, and we're gonna go ahead and remove this hose clamp and just replace this little section of hose right here. So these are the original stainless steel band clamps. You got to be careful because they're on the plastic spigots of this little check valve right here. So you just want to use some diagonal pliers, and usually you just want to cut it right. You can see I'm using pretty large diagonal pliers. You can either cut it, or you can also lift this little tab and get it off. Sometimes, it's loose enough where you can just kind of work it off too. You can see this hose is kind of in bad shape. But you got to take care when you're removing these things. And there's not much room up in here to mess with these clamps here. So I'm getting the pliers under. There we go. I lifted it right off that little thing, and now you can just pull that right off. And that's not reusable. You got to throw that band away. And then up at the top, you're going to do the same thing. Obviously, my big head's going to be in the way here. So I think I got my needle nose. I'll get my head out of the way so you can see what's going on. And I'm going to go ahead and peel that thing right off. And that one doesn't have a barb on it, so it pulls right off. And you could kind of see the length of this hose here. And it can just be replaced with just standard 5/16 gas line. Like the braided gas line. This like rubbery stuff doesn't last that long. Obviously it rotted in about 12, 13 years time. So I'll take a little piece of hose, and it just needs to be about the same length. And I could certainly say that this hose will probably last a lot longer here. So if you're doing this at home, I would highly recommend just using a smaller size worm gear style hose clamp. You can certainly get up there and get a small screwdriver in there to do that. Nice thing is these are reusable. In the interest of doing this at the shop, nice and quick, I'll use the same type of stainless steel bands. I don't expect most people to have these because there's several different sizes of them. And you do need a special tool to crimp them. But if you're doing it at home, I would recommend having two hose clamps. We sell these on scooterwest.com, and they're HCL4 Mini is the part number for this. You can order a small section of hose, which is fuel line, 5/16. And that would be in plenty of materials to do this job here. So these are kind of sized for this, this hose, and I'll go ahead and push it onto the barb that's on that carbon canister first. And if you have any trouble with this, you can put a little bit of soap on it. You never want to put oil on these hoses. And I have a special type of pincers. They have these side pinchers that will close up that hose clamp there, or I could go straight on. Alternatively, you could even use like diagonal pliers real carefully up in there. It is pretty tight to get up into this area to get that closed up. Line's not coming off, the hose clamp's nice and tight. And the next part is jamming this little valve back onto so I get the hose clamp on there and then push that little valve. Be careful because that valve is pretty fragile. If you break the valve, you obviously have a vacuum leak through that valve. Kind of got to get my two hands in there. It's just pretty tight quarters. A lot of people never see these leaks because you would just never know to look up in the frame at these hoses that are buried up in here. And now we got the air leak is now fixed. you know, with a new piece of hose that should last a long time. Everything's all tight under here. So now we got that air leak fixed up in here. I could plug it in my computer and reset the fuel trims if I wanted to. If you're doing this at home, typically if you just ride it for about 5 or 10 miles, warm it all the way up, you know, 1-2 heat cycles with the air leak fixed, it will reset the check engine light. So that should just extinguish the check engine light, and it should be idling a lot better now that you don't have an air leak in there. So who would ever thought one little hose that would have rotted away could cause problems with your scooter? But there you have it. That's how to find air leak that's rather hidden on the Vespa GTSs. Even the GT200s, a lot of those lines are rotting. The GT200s have way more vacuum and fuel lines on them, and they're very prone to all rotting away. At this point, if you have a GT200, I would highly suggest replacing nearly all the rubber lines that are related to the fuel and, you know, the fuel and the vacuum system on the intake manifold, so you don't have issues with it. But now that these fuel injected GTS 250s, you know, that came out in 2006, 2007, they're starting to get old. You'll see things like this. The fortunate thing is the high pressure fuel lines on the fuel injection generally are very rugged and hold up for the life of the vehicle typically, as long as they're all routed exactly as they should be from the factory. Not too likely that you'll see high pressure fuel leaks. They put very high quality lines in the interest of safety, but you have other incidental lines that come off the intake manifold that may be starting to leak and cause havoc with stalling and idling issues. Thanks again for watching. This is Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com. If you're looking for parts to repair your older Vespa GTS 250, you know where to go, ScooterWest.com. We have the largest selection of both modern and vintage Vespa parts in North America. In stock, we have a 12,000 square foot warehouse, and we have several people that answer the phones here and fulfill orders same day. And so you get your parts nice and quick. Maybe you don't have anybody locally to get parts and a dealer to support locally. We certainly got you covered with parts, and we have them in stock. Thanks again for watching. Robot here. If it's the first time you come across a video of mine, consider subscribing and search Vespa Motorsport on YouTube, and you can see all the other videos I've produced over the last 11 years. Thanks again.